It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Okay, I think we are going to get started. Hello, my name is Wendy Shaya. I'm the author of The Black Cell. Thank you for joining us for Wendy's Wednesday Words. The first Wednesday of every month, we will share some thoughts, some interviews. Today, I am really excited to be joined by one of my favorite people in the world, my teacher and mentor, Brother Ron Chisom, co-founder of the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. Brother Ron I have been working with Brother Ron over the last year because I am writing his memoir and organizing manual. I am so excited to be able to sit and listen and learn from him. I've learned a lot. Brother Ron, welcome. I think you're on mute, so you might need to unmute yourself. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Excited to have you.
It's good to be here. I'm looking forward to having this discussion, and thanks for setting it up.
Yeah, well, thank you. The honor is really for me. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and about starting the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond?
I'd be very glad to. And again, my name is Ronald Chisom. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. I've been in New Orleans all of my life for 81 years, give or take a year. Could be a little bit more than that, but I do remember being 81. But over the time, you kind of forget. I've been married close to 60 years. And I think I just had an anniversary, December the 19th passed. And I think I'm 59, but when I round it off, I say 60 because it's so close to 60 years. I have my daughter and I have two grandkids who are doing wonderful in school, and out of school. They have jobs now, and to see them grow and develop. And one of them is direct part of our training. He's a trainer with the People's Institute, and my daughter is administrative director with the Institute. So I'm so glad to keep the family involved, keep the generation in anti-racist work to continue. As I say, I'm from New Orleans, and I've been doing community work in New Orleans all of my life, and that's what helped me start the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, because in New Orleans, I don't know if how many folks have been to New Orleans, but everybody's familiar with the French quarters and a lot of those things in New Orleans. But there's also one of the oldest Black neighborhoods in New Orleans called Treme, Treme. Some of the greatest musicians in the world, Louis Armstrong and Wynton Marsalis family, and great musicians. We've been ambassador all over the world with this great, what we call brass band music and all types of music. Great people like Mahalia Jackson has come from this particular community or this particular city. And I do a lot of my community work in that community called Treme. So if you ever visit New Orleans again, I know we go to the French Quarter, but right adjacent to the French Quarters is this oldest Black neighborhood called Treme. We'd love you to come by and spend a little time in that community. It's such the culture is so rich, so you can feel it in your bones. When you come to New Orleans and you come to Treme community, you feel like you're in motherland. It's hard to express, but that's where I do a lot of my work at Wendy. I've been doing organizing there for many years and trying to deal with some of the injustice that goes on in all the institutions and systems in this country. And I started dealing with things like fighting against slum landlords, environmental racism, and the injustice in the health system. And I primarily, as an organizer, was just bringing people together. Never part of any training group, just wanted to make a difference in people's lives and in my life. And again, I didn't know I was an organizer. I guess it was someone bringing people together. And what I noticed after several years, that we would, in the Black community, we would organize it, we'd go fight injustice, then eventually we began to fight each other. And I didn't understand that dynamics. So I just kept doing what I do, and we go confront the elected officials and fight injustice, and then we began fighting each other. So that's when I realized maybe I need some training myself. Maybe since I was the main organizer, maybe I need to get better at what I was doing. So I got training from a man named Saul Alinsky. That's Saulalinsky. Saul Alinsky is like the grandfather of teaching people on different methods on how to organize. And I went and spent 2 weeks in one of his methods. It's called Midwest Academy, based in Chicago. And I learned a lot of great skills from Saul Alinsky, really how to deal with group dynamics and tactical research. Really was very helpful in my work. But as I began to use this, I realized even all of those great skills I had got still didn't deal with the internal stuff that was going on, the fighting each other and the ego tripping and all these things. And what I did realize that after a period of time, that we're going to be effective in dealing with any social change work, we have to understand racism and what systemic racism is. I thought as a Black man, I knew all about racism. What I realized, I knew about bigotry, I knew about racial discrimination, but I did not have a systemic analysis. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I realized if I'm going to really be effective in making real changes, I must begin to understand, I must have a definition of racism, I must have a common analysis of racism if I'm going to be really turn things around. Because when I got the skills from Saul Alinsky, which was very helpful, I realized skills alone are not going to make the impact. Because if you give somebody some skills and they have not dealt with their racism, they can become a skillful racist. And that's the concern that I had. Because, and then these folks would get certified, even more of a problem. Realize you got to understand that racism dehumanizes people, and the reason why we do undoing racism work is to bring humanity back into our work, because all of us who are doing this work have been dehumanized. That's what systems and racism has done to us. So that's what I've done. I started this in 1980 when I met Dr. Jim Dunn, another African-American man in Ohio. When him and I met in New York City, we both had our own organizations. I was a part of a group called SOC, Southern Organizing Committee, with a white woman named Ann Braden and one of the lieutenants of Dr. King, Reverend C.T. Vivian. They really played a big role in helping us get off the ground and starting the People's Institute in 1980. And that's, again, Dr. Jim Dunn and I together started it because we thought it was, both of us are organizers, and we do not know if we're going to be effective. We must understand how racism plays a role in doing this organizing if we're really going to be effective.
Thank you so much for that overview. And you've touched on several things, Brother Ron, that we're going to come back to. We're going to come back to the concept of organizing, and we're going to come back to the concept of how racism dehumanizes all of us. But okay. I want to ask you a question about one of the big systemic challenges you took on. You took on a system. In 1986, you sued the state of Louisiana. The case is Chisom versus the state of Louisiana. So people can look that up if you want to learn more about it. Can you tell us a little bit about that lawsuit? Tell us why you sued the state of Louisiana and what it accomplished.
Yeah, well, this was over 25 years ago when in New Orleans, when New Orleans have a lot of challenges, like many cities in many states. But in Louisiana, we've never had any African-American, any Black folks at a state Supreme Court level representing us. And, that's very important. That's the highest court you can get for any kind of a justice. And having nobody who understands who you are or the culture of our community, even all white people there, became the challenge. So Mark Muriel, who was the mayor of New Orleans and his father was the mayor, he's now executive director of the Urban League. Him and many attorneys, Attorney William Quigley, there were many lawyers that called me in one day because they knew I was doing activist work And they called me in and said, Brother Chisom, would you mind being the chief plaintiff in this case? Because they said they looked at my organizing and my work, and I wasn't engaged too much in the electoral politics. So they thought it was somebody that would be important, who wasn't engaged at that level, that could be the chief plaintiff. And I, of course, I said, didn't understand legally what all that really meant. I said, I'll definitely be involved. They said, well, we need someone to be the chief plaintiff because they explained to me we don't have any Black State Supreme Court justice, and we need someone in those positions. And so I said, of course, yes. And then we realized that you have all white men at a state Supreme Court level, and they were not about to give up any of their seats to invite anybody Black to be a part of that. So these lawyers did their research, did their homework, and they found out under the Voting Rights Act, you can appoint somebody in that seat. They still would have to run for that office. But you have to go to the state Supreme Court to really see if the Supreme Court would support this happening. And these lawyers put really a great legal team, and we went to a state Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in our favor, which was really, it was revolution in many, many ways. So that's when we was able to appoint Judge Bernadette Johnson, the first Black woman to Supreme Court, state Supreme Court justice, and she's been a tremendous. And then it became known as the Chisom seat. And you can Google us up in every legal thing, if anybody want to begin to do something similar to that in their state, you can definitely look that up. And because of that, once she got in that seat, she ran for office and she got elected. And then they were very upset because, first Black woman in that role, but after several years, she got to be the state Supreme Court justice, which means now she's their boss. And they were kind of upset with that. And they gave her, even though she was a state Supreme Court judge, they were still giving her difficulty, and she was their boss. So eventually, she got that position and did tremendous work. When you check some of her legal cases, she was fair to everyone. So it was an honor for me to be part of that and having someone that I look up to there right now. And we stay in touch with each other. She's retired, she's her second year in retirement right now. And she's very supportive, of me, and she's been knowing me for a while, and I've been knowing her, and I'm just so honored to be part of that history, Wendy.
That is an amazing example of tackling systemic racism, right? Very often we talk about racism and we talk about it as if it's going to just go away on its own. But what I think you demonstrated is how we can tackle racist systems and win at those racist systems, and that it's not just about changing hearts and minds, but we have to change laws as well and institutions in order to truly see anti-racism come about in our society.
I'm so glad you're pulling that out, because at the time I didn't understand the depth, how strong those systems was. I really didn't. I think that's really helped me to go even more into the work what I'm doing, and the team that was a part of us are doing right now. We even exploring more what the systemic racism is. We're learning now that to talk about it, not even understand what that really means. It's like people talk about racism, but had no definition of it, and that's what we worked on at the Institute with a lot of key people that put this together. And it's made a big, big difference to have a definition that people understand, have a common analysis, because some people operate, they think they're operating out of a systemic analysis, but they're really operating out of a needs analysis or a victim analysis, or want to be a do-gooder analysis. And those are important in the right context. But you really got to understand the systemic analysis, because those are the systems that creates the need. It creates the victims. Mm-hmm. So you really got to understand not what comes from that, but what creates that.
Mm-hmm. So you're really talking about getting to the root issues, and that when we just address needs and victims, those exist, those really do exist. It's true that, people in many communities need, housing, help with housing and food and other things. But what you're really talking about are, if we dive underneath those needs, then we can see the systems that created those needs to begin with. And if all we're focusing on the needs and we're not getting down to the root issues, the systems, then we're really not making any long-term change.
And I would say, right, see, needs are important. And we got to, people need housing, they need health needs, they need clothing, they need shelter. So we have to take care of those needs.
Yes.
And we need programs to do that.
Yes.
But we have to also make that the programs are used to wake people up, not to further program them. See, because a lot of people, when you give them assistance, it becomes a dependency, and that's not healthy. When there's a general dependency around this country, we got to help people to get from being dependent to being independent and ultimately interdependent, which means now they're awakened, and so we've got to, and actually most programs are not doing it, even mentoring programs, and again, programs are important, but we have to develop a mechanism that raises consciousness. And people that put up money for programs, that's not what the intent is. It's not the intent. It's to wake people up. It's to trying to keep the money coming in to deal with infrastructure and all these other things. So that's what we are really, when we say undoing racism, that's what it means for us.
I love this concept you talk about waking people up. And, one of the things I've heard you talk about is the importance of organizing to anti-racist work, to organizing, to waking people up, that people are walking around unconscious, and that in some ways, if we don't begin to organize them, we won't see them wake up. We won't see that change. A lot of people don't see the connection between anti-racist work and organizing. Can you talk about why those two things are related?
Well, I understand it from my experience because I've done both of them. For years, I was organizing using some of the Saul Alinsky approach, along with other people's approach, which is very, very helpful. I learned these great skills. And what I realized as an organizer, I thought that's what you needed. I thought you needed a toolkit. So everybody come to the workshop, they want a toolkit. And I would think, how to give them a toolkit? Then I realized later, a toolkit without an anti-racist understanding, the toolkit will give you great skills, but the skills you get will only fortify the system, because the systems, they operate with skills and tools. And if you don't understand, undoing racism for us is bringing humanity into your organizing. Most folks are not organizing from a humanistic approach. They're organizing from a technical approach and a mechanical approach. You need technical and mechanical, but if you don't have the humanistic aspect of it, then the skills and tools that you're using to deal with system will only fortify the systems, because the skills and tools become like nails and hammers, and it will only add to the oppression. Now, with the skills and the tools as an organizer, you bring humanity into the process. Institutions and systems do not like humanity because their job is to dehumanize people. That's what you check the history of system, historically and presently. What they do, they create bureaucrats, bureaucracy to maintain their product, not to really enhance the people, but, and the process they do is dehumanization. So when you're organizing with principles, you're bringing humanity into your work. And then when you bring humanity within a system, the system becomes more vulnerable for change. It becomes the analogy we use between Superman. Superman, what made him weak was kryptonite. What makes an institution more vulnerable is when you bring humanity into your organizing. You cannot organize a system with skills alone and tools alone. You got to have skills, tools, and humanity. Then you become more of a humanistic anti-racist organizer, not just a technical organizer.
And when you talk about principles, as you talk about humanity, bringing humanity back into the organizing, one of the things you made me think about was that one of the principles of the People's Institute is learning from history. And in many ways, I think, and you can tell me if I'm right about this, when the principle talks about learning from history, it's not just learning the history of your society, but it is also learning your own history, learning the history of your family, learning the history of your culture. Talk about how learning history brings humanity back into anti-racist organizing.
Well, just like you said, Wendy, what I realized, I didn't like history when I was in school, because what I realized, the history was it was important, but there was so many lies in history. So you gotta look at history, but you've got to be able to decipher what's real. And the kind of history that we read about school is only, in many ways, is to keep us oppressed. So even when we at the People's Institute, we had to look at history and look at all that history in the past and take that and create a history that was liberating for us. That's what we need. We need a liberation type of history. So you can use some of that information, but you got to develop that history that helps people to penetrate institutions and systems. So history is important. I have a history. When you have a history, your family had a history that got you where you at right now. And we don't do that, now they're doing genealogical studies and doing, go chase back to Africa, what part of, which is all it's a major part. It's a very good thing that's going on. But we really got to know that history is a principle. I thought history was just remembering dates. And I really had a difficult time, because as you know, I don't have a real academic background. I didn't finish college, but I have a lot of practical experience, finished high school. But I think I was disenchanted with what I knew and what I saw my parents knew. And I realized that the way the system was set up, it wasn't really, it didn't want me to learn. It didn't want me to really learn real stuff. I think it's what helped me with my venture in learning more about history. I'm thinking about it now, that we're bringing it up right now. But I think for my survival, I had to really think about history in the context of saving my life, because, and I realize now why I dread it so much. But yeah, the history for me that brings humanity is that it will guide your work. The principle that we use at the Institute, we're saying that when you're doing organizing and you don't understand your history, the chances are you're going to get off course. You're going to miss the beat. But if you really understand something about your history, you can get back on target, back to what your objectives are. So I know I'm going around about history, but history is very, very important. It's one of the principles of the Institute, but it goes with a lot of other principles, not by itself. Right. You can't just have history by itself when we talk about a principle.
When you talk about the importance of history, I think a lot about, when I was writing The Black Cell, how I really tried to add a lot of history, a history that our young people don't learn in school. History about what has happened in this country that has brought us to where we are. And one of the things I have heard from the young people when they read the book is, oh, I didn't know this happened. I didn't understand. Now that I understand these pieces of history, I can look at my present and I can have a better systemic analysis, because it's the history helps us to build our systemic analysis of what is happening right now. So I can really see how important that is. I want to go back a little bit to something that we were talking about a minute ago. We were talking about how racism dehumanizes everyone, and I think sometimes we understand that. I think we understand that all sort of in concept, but I think a lot of people think that racism dehumanizes people of color only. But when I talk to you, you say that racism dehumanizes everyone of every color, including white people.
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about that? How does racism dehumanize everyone?
Well, for me is that I didn't understand that, because I just thought it's primarily in the Black community. But when I began to then checking history out and learning more about how systems operate, and not only to produce their product, but how they operate as a systemic thing, as a structural thing, because I didn't understand all of that. And I'm still learning about systems and institutions right now that, institutions, is the arm of the system. And what I realized that systems, remember when I talked to you earlier about fighting, the in-house fighting that was going on within the organization I was a part of, that I realized that at the time we didn't talk about it, but later I realized a thing called internalized oppression. And I didn't know a lot about what that really meant, but our organization began to look at that a little bit closer. And there's something I learned from a lady named Ricky Marcuse and a couple other people. She did something called co-counseling. And again, I don't know a lot about co-counseling, but I used to talk about oppression when I get a little information about oppression. And I began, along with our team, began to look at, well, what is this oppression? And I realized it took a while to understand it, because it didn't come like, this, that we realized that institutions and systems start giving a message to Black people inside our mother's womb that we ain't nothing. Because, we get treated like we nothing, but and then it looks like we've accepted it but it comes from a generational, it's been going on for years and years and years, and so you get a message, the way your mother had been treated historically, back to the history, the way she got health care disrespectfully, the sterilization, on and on and on for Black women. And a child inside the mother's womb can feel it, over generations. So when a child come here, the systems never really was for us anyway. All of them tell us we nothing or we inferior. Highest unemployment, worse health care, more locked up in jail, more stopped by the police, more police killing, on and on and on. That's a message you get, that your life ain't worth nothing. So for years, we began to start talking about that in the workshop and realize, as an organizer, I have to understand that if I'm going to be effective, I've got to understand internalized oppression. And initially, we didn't want to deal with no white people because, they just get in the way. We got to kick our own situation. And I even was told over the years when I first started, don't work with no white people because they don't get it. They this, they that. And then Dr. Jim Dunn, who's the co-founder with me, said, Brian, anytime you throw any human being away, then you don't know what it means to be a human being. And what I realized, damn, it made me really think. So then we start in 1980, we started inviting white, Black, everybody to the training. Because you may not want to work with white people, but they'll work with you whether they're there or not. That's the kind of leverage they got. So I'd rather have them under our wing than doing the stuff to us from an external position. They do it anyway, but I'd rather know a little bit of what I'm dealing with. And then we began to realize this is a process to learn this, that white people have been dehumanized because they've been told inside their mother womb that they're better because the way their mom and daddy was treated, or their mom was treated, and that white person come in and the system treats them better, but they pay a price for that though. Because the system gives them objects and things. that becomes part of the racialization and the dehumanization. When you start getting objects, you become an object. So that takes away your humanity. See, they get a privilege, but the privilege takes away your humanity. So you pay a price for that. They get racialized, they get dehumanized, they get benefits. They lose a sense of their culture. They become things because they bind to the concept of white, and white is a political thing. They don't know their ancestors. That's part of the, when you don't know who your family is, don't know your culture. When you define culture is a way of life. So you don't know your life, then things become your life. That's part of your dehumanization. So, and we work with a lot of homeless people in Atlanta, white and Black. And homeless white people say, I might be poor, at least I'm not Black. And it told us this, I might be, So they're starving to death as white people, but still in their mind, they better. That's part of dehumanization. So internalized oppression is what we talk about in our workshop, is a thing that affects everybody, Black, Latino, Asian, Native American, every group. But then when you check the history, you realize even in the white community, when Europeans came over here for a better way of life, that many Europeans didn't accept giving up their culture. Many Europeans went back to if I got to give up my life and my culture, I'm going back home. So there's many books you can read to show that everybody didn't buy into the white thing from Europe, but they pay a price. Just being white, because all white means is just privilege, nothing to do with your humanity. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's just a little bit of that.
I love that. And when you talk about white people giving up their culture in order to be white, I remember hearing you say that you'll ask a group of white people, how many of you still speak the language of your ancestors' culture? How many of you still live in the ways? And what we've quickly learned is that many white people in this country no longer speak the languages of their European ancestors. They're no longer deeply steeped in the culture. Right. And that's what you mean when you talk about what many white people have given up in order to be white.
That's right.
To be sort of a monolith, a superior monolith, where at one point there were Italians and there were Germans and Irish and Polish people, and now they're white, right? In the same way that we were dehumanized when we were forced to come here, but we were,
that's right,
from different tribes, different countries. Yeah. We were kidnapped and we were brought here, and we're just Black. And right. So this is, and right. The same thing happens for Asian people, and the same thing happens for Latinx people, and the same thing happens for Native American people. We just all get flattened into this one monolith when we are each of our groups rich with all these different cultures, but racism makes it about, being a monolith and where you fall in the hierarchy, right? Yeah. Very, very interesting.
And when this discussion is very important, because what's going on in the world right now. And when this discussion is very important, because what's going on in the world right now. So to me, our books, your book, my book, are very important because it's when you look at the world and you look at the mass of white people, and now have a leader that they've been wanting to do what they wanted to do. We need to be as sharp as we can. We need to be grounded. We need to understand organizing, because that's what's going to save us. It ain't no program, it ain't no legislation, it ain't none of that congressperson and all these kind of foolish stuff. That ain't going to save us. What has helped us every step of the way to get where we at has been organizing. Mm-hmm. And even though we filed legal suits, it's been through organizing. Because we could, you couldn't follow. So we really got to intensive. We got to talk about organizing as a way of keeping us alive in this world, because these systems are organizing against us, and it's breaking down. And we've got to know, we just can't. We sitting down and watching what they're doing. We got to step up our game, and I think we got to push that in our work, organizing, because that's what's got us here. Every movement. Civil rights movement, the women's movement, populist movement, the labor movement has been through organizing. And they all had their challenges, but we learned from that. That's history again. We got to learn from that history and begin to step our organizing up in a humanistic way and that kind of thing, because that's what's going to keep us going. Timing is right. The timing is right.
One of the things I have heard you say, there's a quote that I heard from you that has really stuck in my head. And I even had it on my email for a while. And you said, if you're organizing and you're not building leaders, then all you're doing is manipulating people and caring for yourself. What is leadership? Why is leadership development so important in anti-racist organizing?
Well, leadership to me is part of the raising consciousness. Because when we do organizing, we're organizing around issues. Call it the issue syndrome. In fact, how many issues you working on? I'm working on 5. I'm working on environmental. I'm working on health. I'm working on education. Issues are important, but issues are only a mechanism to develop people. It's only a mechanism to wake people up. Issues are for you to develop a power base. So you don't think to do reactionary work. You can do proactive work, or you can do preventative work. But most of us don't do preventative work. We want to react to the issue. And the system knows how to get us to react. We be real quiet and you'll throw an issue out there. Then we start reacting. We got to make sure whatever we're working on, we got to do it with the intent to begin to give people a sense of their power. A sense of their power, not empower them. You through the issue you're working on, as you develop leadership, you're taking people through a process of we call it internal dynamics of leadership development, which is a process. And then with that leadership development, the thing we left out over the years is accountability. It's another principle. You can't develop leadership without accountability, because you can develop a beautiful leader. If you don't have the accountability, that leader will turn on you. So you must have leadership and accountability. Those are principles that go together. We want elected officials to be accountable. We as community groups and as organizers also must be accountable.
So as we are organizing and we are building leadership and we are accountable to each other, is that who we're accountable to as we are building leadership? Say more about accountability.
We're accountable to each other, but see, remember, there's a divisiveness in this country that was intentional between groups of color. Yeah. Latino, African, there's a divisiveness. We say we people of color, but we really don't work together. So we have to develop the kind of leadership that brings us together. It brings us together. And it's almost, you got to get like a cleanse, get it cleaned out. And then we're talking about dismantling the system, but we have to dismantle some of that stuff in us. And that's what conscious raising is. When you can raise somebody conscious, another brother, sister who may be from a different ethnic group of color, and we begin to embrace them. To me, that's serious organizing. Yeah. But we organize and we don't bring each other together. We act to an issue, and we go back. Whether it's black, brown, we got to bring that community together. That's why the system can do things to us, because they know, you got the Latinx over here and the black folks here and the Asians over there, and we deal with each other. Everybody got certain friends, and I'm talking about in a broader context. We don't do that.
Yes,
we don't do that. And that has to be the intention.
It's very effective, this separation of races, and really sort of keeping us fighting against each other by saying, well, this group is better than this group. And, it's one of the ways that divides. One of the other principles I want to ask you about is I've heard you talk about gatekeeping, and gatekeeping is a principle of the People's Institute. What is gatekeeping, and why is it important?
Well, gatekeeping is a concept we talked about many, many years ago. It's I worked with a nonprofit. I worked for the Institute. I worked with many, many nonprofits, and I began to notice, not initially, but how we started off as a nonprofit, as a community group. Well, we started off as a group of people with no organization trying to make a difference. Then we realized we had to get a 501c3 to become official, because we needed money. But in order to get money, you need a 501c3 as a tax write-off for people who give you money. And then we didn't check the history of that again. Because then we realized that 501c3 came in 1954, the same time Brown versus Education, where a group of foundation and government got together, because what happened during that time, organizers was raising so much hell in fighting the system, in the federal government's face. And the system realized, no, we got to do something. We're sending them money and they confronting us. So that's when they got together at a conference, foundations, big foundations in government, and developed a 501c3. And that became a way supposedly to help groups get money, but it also was a way folks who were activists got deactivated. And so the 501c3 became a mechanism to keep things in place. It became a mechanism for the system to use us to do its business. And it allowed us to do community stuff, but we wasn't waking nobody up. And we didn't understand at the time. So gatekeepers are somebody who monitor for others, translate for others, go get money for on behalf of others, and don't bring others with us. And I've done that, you know. And what a gatekeeper does in the area dealing with change, the systems is an arrangement. So as gatekeepers with nonprofits, we keep the arrangement in place. And what we do, we let somebody out of the gate every now and then, and we say they move on up to the east side because they finally got a piece of the pie. And then we get amnesia how we got there. So in other words, the powers to be ain't got to whip us no more. They just hire 501c3 to do it, you know, kind of in essence, you know.
You know, this so rings true for me because I am a Black woman who leads a nonprofit organization. And one of the things I have come to understand is that when you say that the system doesn't need to whip us anymore, doesn't need to beat us anymore, all they really need to do is to develop a 501c3 and put a Black woman in charge as the executive director, and she will maintain the dynamic. She will be the one that will allow, you know, that will translate the resources, that will hold the power, that will not let the enlightenment through, the waking up through. And what the institution has the benefit now being able to say, well, we got a Black woman in charge. Like, what is the problem? How can we do this? We got this Black woman. Look at this Black woman. But what we can't see is that this Black woman is completely asleep.
That's right.
Completely asleep, and she is a puppet of the system. And I have been that. I have been there. And it's something I fight every day, right? To try to not be. And sometimes I look at myself and I go, oh my goodness, here I am. I am that gatekeeper. I am doing that thing because my hands are tied by the 501c3 and the fact that I can't, you know, I can't stir things up too much because, you know, we could lose our 501c3 status. We could, you know, all of this fear and all of these requirements for what you have to do keeps us asleep.
But creatively, Wendy, creatively, that's why leadership development is key. Because if you develop leadership, that will counteract that role you're in. If you don't develop leadership, then we just moving around in that system and pretending we, you know, that kind of thing. So you're absolutely correct. But you develop leadership, and when you develop leadership, you have to make sure the leadership is accountable. Then you can do your work. And there's ways to do it under low key. You know, it is frustrating, and you do have rules, but sometimes you have to know how to bend them rules. You got to know how to be creative with the rules. And that takes a lot of experience, a lot of work. You got to have a team that has an analysis, so it can be done. It can be done, you know.
You know, one of the things that you just said that I think I just want to highlight is that this is not something any one person can do alone, right? There's something that has to be done as part of a group, and that's why it's so important to do this collective work. Well, I want to ask you, this has been such an amazing conversation, and there are so many amazing nuggets that I'm able to pull from what we've been talking about. And of course, we're just scratching the surface. And of course, when our book comes out, all of this is in that book, and you really are sharing a lot of your wisdom. But I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give white people who want to be involved in anti-racist organizing?
Well, they have to check their history. Number one, check their history. A lot of white activists have come to our training over the years. And many of them, not all of them, have said they've left their mamas and daddies because their mom and daddy were racist. So they want to come work in communities of color. Something's wrong with that. We said, you can't throw your mom and daddy away. Like Jim Dunn told me, anytime you throw any human being away, then you don't know what it means to be a human being. And if you know what it means to be a human being, how you can come work in my community with other human beings? That's number one. Secondly, it's a given your mom is racist, but not from the way you think it is, not just because they're bigots, because they got privilege, so they have to get educated, the difference between the bigotry and privilege, because that's why they come to our training, because they think racism is all about being a bigot. No. Secondly, we say your mom and daddy, the reason why you couldn't get your mom and daddy together, because I know you tried as a white activist, but you got very frustrated and you left because you couldn't change them. What it means that your mom and daddy was a better organizer than you. That's what that really means. So it means that you got to get better and knowing how to have patience understand the depth of what organizing is. And because as a white person, you always think you're supposed to be in charge, even as a white activist who's doing maybe some important work, but in your internalization of privilege, you still think you're supposed to be in charge. So you got to work on that. You got to work on that. So we're saying they got to do the same thing. They got to do their anti-racist work with principles. Remember, they've been dehumanized too. Because every time I do an organizing, I'm doing organizing not just to help somebody out there, trying to help me. See, I'm in partnership, and when I'm in partnership, when I'm doing something for you, it reciprocates to make me get in touch with my humanity. So to me, they just got to be, we give them a context to get an analysis, common language. Now that becomes very dangerous too when we give white people this analysis, because some of them would take it and write a book on it, would take it and start using the language out there, and they won't follow through because they want to be the unique white teacher. And we've seen that happen in situations. It's a risk we take, but many we can show you around the country, in many cities, have made a big difference in how they approach their families. In fact, we have white people now who bring their mothers and fathers to the workshop, and then they become a trainer with us, and they got to call their mom and dad a racist in the workshop. We've had that, and their children. So we've had evidence many over the years. And that, for a white person now who's a trainer with us, and some who are not trainers, they got so turned on by the training, they've now brought their family and their children. And some of their kids now are teaching in universities this anti-racist analysis. So we got a lot of examples where we had a group called a European Descent, been together for over 37 years, all over the country. They meet regular, and their dissent was been using their name. Now they have to step their game up a little bit more. So anyway, there's a lot of things that they can do. The other thing that was important for them, white activists who want to help children of color, quit doing that, go help your own white children. How do you do that? Develop a real history book, 10 pages. Some of the real heroes and sheroes that contributed to humanity as white people. I know a lot of them. There's some living right now. They could develop a history book because everybody want to deal with Dr. King and Malcolm as white people. Get your own history books. Develop one. And there ain't got to be no massive 10 pages. They got to start it with their children, because if they don't, the Proud Boys going to get to their kids. Donald Trump will get to their kids right now. And some of these folks you're seeing, white folks now, they were kids at one time.
Yeah.
So they got to get to them. They got a lot of work on their damn hand. They want to work with us, but they need to work with their own community.
I love that, because in many ways, this focus white people have on Black people, when people of color, when they're doing anti-racist work, continues to suggest that we are the problem, when in fact they focused on their own people, because that's where the problem is, right? Those where the systems come from. They're focusing on us. What is going to change systemically if white people are focused on us when they want to do anti-racist work? They need to focus on other white people, and that's where the work needs to happen.
Well, look at Congress. That's why you need to work on them. Look at Congress. I mean, look at, they're just Republicans and Democrats too. Just look at them. That's an example right now of why they got to work on their people. I mean, just as dumb, stupid, racist, on and on and on. That's why they got to work. If that don't get them motivated, God damn, to work with their children. They better get to their kids fast. They're going to have more clowns like we got in there right now.
Somebody said to me a couple of years ago, I want to do anti-racist work. I want to support you, Wendy. And I was like, I've been Black for over 50 years. I really got this Black thing down. What I need you to do is go work with your own people. If you really want to be anti-racist, that's where the work needs. I don't need you to focus on me. And that's the message that has to get out.
And look, that's how they get their humanity. They don't get the humanity working with Black people. See, when a white activist challenge their mom and dad on racism, they got to fight on their hand. And their mom and daddy is not they're gonna resist that. They're gonna put some pain on that white activist. And when they start feeling pain, they're gonna feel some humanity. Because we too complacent with white people. We protect them too much, on and on and on. We get mad at them, but we get schizo. We talk about them and then protect them on another hand. We do all these crazy shit. So they got to get out there. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is wonderful. One last question for you. So you've given advice for white people, but you know, a lot of people of color are asleep, you know, and one of the reasons I wrote The Black Cell was just to try to get people involved in dialogue to wake up. But what advice would you give for people of color who need to wake up, who are walking around asleep?
We would love we would love to invite them to our training. It's number one. The reason why I say that, because as an organizer, a lot of folks are doing disorganizing in the name of organizing. The training really will help you to do a critical examination of your, whether you're white, black, brown, whatever you may be. That's what the workshop does. It makes you do a critical analysis of yourself. You can talk about what the system doing, what that one doing, but what has happened to us? And that's number one. The training will help you to really to understand when a universal problem everybody has, black, white, and brown, is bringing people together, calling a meeting with our people, and then knowing what to do with them, because you bring our people together and all this internal stuff will play out. The training will help you explain that. How do you deal? Because when we do a workshop, Wendy, with 40 people, to me, it's a community meeting. And I've been in enough community meetings to know how the workshop is going to play out, because I don't look at their titles, I look at them as community people.
Yeah.
And I know when they come in that workshop, they're coming to play out. So we have to know what to do. And there's certain things we do in the workshop to say, look, you better come right if you're coming to challenge us. Because you say you're a community leader, but you ain't got nobody in your group. And we put that out in a very smooth way. So before they come and want to show them what they know in the workshop, we're saying, do you have a constituency? And it's usually a clique. Ain't nobody got most groups ain't got no group. And that's what gives us the leverage. And we use that in the workshop. It'll help in the Black community. We push that, because once you get a base of your own people, you start acting different. See, we act so wow, because it's us as individuals. We get mad, we act mad at this, mad at that. You talk on behalf of the community without their permission. You're doing all those things we talk about, but it's a difference. And so the training will help you to know how to bring, as a Black person, bring other Black people in and know how to maintain them and know how to really work with that group of Black community. And once that happens, your whole dynamics changes. As long as you don't have a group with you, you're tenuous. You do any damn thing. You get mad one day, you get schizoid, you jump on your people, you love your people, and we acting out. Mm-hmm. So the training really helps to get that. And I'm telling you, it's a big difference when you got a team of people. When you got a team, they come out, people come out of workshop as individuals, and it's anything in a workshop without the permission of the community. But if they bring a team of people in and we're in a workshop as Black people, they can't talk like they usually talk, because the people in that room that they brought are going to see how they operate.
True.
Say, damn, that's who's been representing us. So it's a whole different dynamic that we get people to think about. The workshop really helps, for me, it really will strengthen the Black community, and it's done in many, many neighborhoods. And I can give you examples around the country where it made a major difference in communities of color, primarily Black community. And we're very proud of that.
Well, I am a lifelong learner from the People's Institute. I think this last year I went to my 8th and 9th workshop. And we're going to have another one in March. And so I will go to my 10th workshop. And every time I go, I learn something more. I remember the first workshop I went to where I sat there in tears, understanding my own role in in sort of furthering white supremacy. It was the first time I really got a sense of it and I fully understood. And so I sat there, it was just kind of like opening my eyes just a little bit, right? But you can't get it all in one workshop. Is not going to change your whole life. So I kept coming back, and I come back over and over again, because every time I come, I hear something new that I didn't hear before. Or maybe it's something that I'm now ready to hear because I wasn't ready to hear it before. Because, we have these blocks and we don't want to hear things that challenge the way we see ourselves. But when I kept coming to the workshop, my eyes kept, it's like the scales were falling off my eyes, and I was just like overwhelmed with how much work I personally had to do. And so I keep going back because I keep on learning. And now it's almost as if after all this time, I'm finally beginning to internalize it. And I find that the principles roll off my tongue now in a way that they didn't before. I think about them in a way that I didn't think about them.
Keep this in mind. Keep this in mind. When we train a workshop, we do the Socratic approach.
Mm-hmm.
We don't give you nothing that you don't live every day. Yeah. And that's what we did. That's why you feel it, because we pulling out, not putting in.
Yes.
Because you live this as a Black woman. So we putting out what you live, and we taking what you live and putting it in chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
And when if it's not right, if it's not right, you're gonna let us know. But if it's right, you can't deny it. You might try to deny it, but you can't deny it.
That's right.
You know it already. You just know it all over the place. We just make it a little bit more. We put it where you can see the picture.
Yes.
Now the key is that when you leave the workshop, you got to start doing the damn work. That's the key. It can't be the workshop. You got what you got now, and that's gonna come even. It's almost in the workshop. You can look. Damn, look! I can see over the mountain in a workshop. But once you leave the workshop, you're going back down the mountain. Now, what gets you back over the workshop when you could do anti-racist organizing with a team of people? Then you can see then you can get over that mountain again. You get the people out in the workshop, and it blows your mind. But you got to do the organizing to go over that mountain. Yeah. So that's what it is. But we're giving you what you live every day. That's why you feel it.
Yes.
Because you didn't, you feel it because you see it.
Yes.
You see it because you know it.
Yes.
Now all we did was put it out.
You put words to experience.
That's the undoing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The undoing, right? So you put words to what I've experienced and begin to peel back away at the racism that I've experienced, that I've internalized. And
that's why we call it undoing.
Undoing racism makes sense.
People say, they say re-educate, but we call it undoing because something was done to us. Mm-hmm. So undoing, and it takes the training, because we do organizing and the training, but then it's going to take, that's why you got to bring people together, you got to develop them. And I'm telling you, it's going to be like a different, you feel different. It's like, like I tell you all the time, if something happens to me, and something will happen to me, I know the work going to get carried on because it's not a dependency on one person.
That's right.
It's an interdependency on the ideology and philosophy that we've been teaching over the years.
Yeah.
Like I tell you, I meet people in the street all the time, walk up to me and say, Brother Chisom, I just went to the Undoing Racism training, man. You ought to go check it out. So when I hear that, shit, I know the shit is out there. When I hear that, I know it's out there, and we can't, whether we have a national office or not, it's all over the country.
Yeah.
And some people don't even know where they got it from. Some people got it, some people started using it like they invented it, but we know where it came from.
Yeah.
I got to get inside. I'm a little cool out on this porch. I'm going to need to get inside.
Well, we are just about done. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. This, and we're going to have you come back and do a part 2 because there was so much here. We just basically touched the surface of it. We scratched the surface. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. This has been amazing. And of course, we will keep working on our book and hoping that book will be out soon. So definitely look out for it. Book by Ron Chisom, As Told to Wendy Shia. So thank you so much, Brother Chisom. I appreciate you more than you can know.
Well, look, I appreciate you, the way you have helped me to put this book together. I got more encouragement. I can't wait to sit back down because it's moving. I think we can put this in social work schools. I think we can do so much with this here. I think the network around the country will get into it. That's why I want to mention the network inside the book. It might be a different creative way to do it, but we got to talk about how to do that. And again, I want to thank this young sister, Stacy, who I know she's in the background, but her energy, the little time I met, feels right. So I know it's going to be right. So Stacy, thank you so much as well. I'm glad you showed your face, but the energy was real good. And that's what we need. So Wendy, I'm here. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for being who you be. Tell Brother Quint, I love him and looking forward to coming out and hanging out a minute.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Say hi to Miss Jerry for me. Take care of yourself. Talk to you
Will
soon.
do. She's in there sleeping right now. She's sleeping.
Say hi to her. Take care, Brother Rod. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.